Move on, because yesterday the President of the European Council, he's called Donald Tusk, he's Polish, confirmed that a proposal on Britain's reform membership of the EU would be tabled at next month's European Council meeting. But reports this morning that there are plans to change EU rules on refugees could make life more difficult for David Cameron as he attempts to make the case for Britain to stay in Europe. Here's Joko to explain.
Yes, under current rules known as the Dublin Convention, refugees have to claim asylum in the first European country they arrive in. But the first country of entry principle is under pressure, with southern European countries such as Greece and Italy accused of failing to register the 1.1 million migrants that have passed through on the way to northern Europe. European Council President Donald Tusk has warned that Europe faces grave consequences if it can't agree a new system by March. While Britain is currently signed up to the Dublin Convention, it has an opt-out on justice and home affairs rule changes. But concerns that huge numbers of migrants who may have arrived and are still arriving in the EU could end up in Britain won't help David Cameron meet the Conservatives' manifesto commitment of reducing net migration to tens of thousands. Now, net migration currently stands at 336,000, so a long way off. What might any rule changes mean for the Prime Minister's attempts to keep Britain in the EU? Andrew.
Thanks, Joko. We're joined now by Kate Hoey, co-chair of Labour's campaign to leave the EU. Labour Leave, it's called. It launches today. Welcome to the programme. David Gauke, let me come to you first. Would the government look kindly on changing the Dublin Agreement?
Well, we think the principle behind the Dublin Agreement, in other words, that you claim asylum in your first safe country, is the right one.
So you wouldn't change that?
So, I mean, we'd obviously need to look at the particular details, and there may be aspects of the proposal.
Well, it's not a detail, it's a principle. What we're told is that the Commission is going to propose that they end that principle, that you automatically have to seek asylum in the first country you arrive. What would the government's attitude be to that kind of change?
Well, I think it's reasonable to say we'd want to have a look at what the whole proposal is. That's an important aspect of it, clearly, but we'd need to see what the whole proposal was. But I think the point I would make is that the principle behind you claim asylum in your first safe country is one that we think is sensible, that has been better than it would otherwise be. And there would have to be something quite significant elsewhere in the package for us to be enthusiastic about
If you don't want to change it, but others do you have a veto to stop it?
I think that my understanding is that we would be able to opt out or not opt into those arrangements. But again, we'd have to see what the precise proposal was.
So we wouldn't necessarily have a veto to stop it?
Well, we might
could
not
try to exclude ourselves.
We might be able to exclude ourselves. And
it.
of course, it is important to remember that we are outside Schengen. So it may be that there's a different arrangement for those countries outside Schengen than those who are inside.
How many asylum seekers have been sent back to the European country on which they landed under the Dublin Agreement in Britain?
I don't have that number.
Well, it looks, although it's quite hard to get the figures, as is often the case in these matters, it looks like it's under 1,000 a year. So it's de minimis.
Well, that may well be the case, but there is also, if you like, a deterrent effect, and it may well, the fact that there is a principle here that exists.
What's the deterrent?
Well, the point being is that there may be people who, if you scrap the principle, and this is one of the things we would need to look at, one of the risks might be that you would have more people travelling to the UK on the assumption that they would then be able to.
But the Dublin Agreement applies to everybody, but it's just the Germans are not implementing it.
Well, as I say, there's what we need to have an understanding of is there going to be a behavioural change? Will people be more likely to come to the UK if that principle doesn't apply?
Isn't it
one of the concerns I think we would have?
Isn't it unfair, given that it's clear your government's policy is going to be to campaign to stay in the European Union, that for purely geographic reasons, Greece and Italy have to bear the brunt of the million arrivals, and that we do nothing to share the load? Isn't there a case for trying to change the rules?
Well, I think your point about fairness, the United Kingdom does make a very big contribution towards, for example, humanitarian help around Syria.
Yes, but that's in Syria. We don't take many migrants in.
Yeah, but I mean, the issues are linked because our humanitarian contribution in Syria and our support to Turkey, for example, is enabling more people to stay
but it's not.
in that area than they
but it's not.
otherwise
There's
would.
no evidence of that,
than they
David.
otherwise
There's
would.
no evidence. There's 2,000 a day arriving. What difference is the Syrian or the Turkish aid meant? By the way, we're not even aware that the Turkish money has been spent. We can't see any sign of it on the ground. There's 2,000 a day arriving from Syria and other parts of the Middle East. What difference is it making?
If we're not active, if we don't provide support in the region, then the risk of there being more refugees coming to Europe is likely to increase.
Well, that's unquantifiable. There was 1 million last year.
Yeah, very large numbers, but they could be higher, and we are making a contribution, and we're making.
Well, whatever the number, you're not taking any.
And in terms of
whatever the number, you're not taking any.
And in terms of fairness, well, we did take 5,000, I think, Syrian refugees.
That was from Syria.
Yeah, but in terms of fairness, our contribution as one of the wealthier members of the European Union is to put more money in, I think, than any other member state in terms of that humanitarian support.
It's
so
just
we are making a fair contribution.
Let me come to Kate Hoey. How many Labour MPs do you think will support Brexit?
I'd want to bet. I said that would be your first question, Andrew.
There you go. I usually bet that politicians won't answer it.
Well, we're in a minority. We are in a minority within the PLP.
I do know that.
What we have discovered just from the very short time that we've been going, although we officially launched today, is that we have huge support out there amongst Labour Party members at the grassroots and Labour supporters, more importantly.
So
but the reality is...
Let me come back to my question.
OK, but Andrew, but it's very important,
Labour MPs.
This referendum will not be won to leave the EU by MPs, 650.
I understand that, but please indulge, since you correctly guessed my question, it means you've had plenty of time to think about the answer.
I will tell you.
Roughly how many?
Roughly, we will have the same number as we had who voted and supported a referendum when the Labour leadership didn't want it.
How many?
And those who, around about 25, 30.
All right, 25,
but that is irrelevant, really, because the campaign will be won in the country by ordinary members of the British public who've got the chance.
That bit I understand about referenda, that it's not just MPs that get to vote.
And it's very important.
Even I understand that. You must be very pleased that John Mills, Labour's, I think your party's biggest private donor, wants Jeremy Corbyn to allow a free vote on the European referendum. Do you think you'll get one?
Oh, of course we get a free vote. I mean, the Conservatives have given a free vote. The idea that Labour would not allow a free vote on an issue like this would be just nonsense.
Is that right?
John Mills, can I just say about John Mills? John Mills led the campaign in 1975 to leave the common market. He's been a long-standing supporter of
But you think you get a free vote? Will there be a free vote?
Absolutely.
Well, I hope not. I'm committed to us staying in Europe. I think that's for the benefit of British workers.
Why not have a free vote?
And therefore, I hope that we decide as a party, and I'm pretty confident we will, that our position is clear on it, and therefore we have a whip vote.
Why? Why, when the Conservatives, with
because
who are
I'm
in
very
government,
clear.
Can't even... Yes, but why are you going
because
to whip MPs who know that their constituents and that the vast majority, we know now, of Labour supporters, many of whom, of course, who went and voted for UKIP precisely because of this issue, and we want to win them back. Our party and Jeremy Corbyn's leadership is about reconnecting with voters to the idea that, first of all, we didn't want a referendum, then as soon as we're back in opposition, we agree to a referendum 2 days later. Now that we would say we would have a whipped vote is just democracy out the window.
Let Owen Smith respond.
The reason the Tories are having a free vote is because they couldn't possibly whip their party, because they are completely riven at the centre on this issue. The Labour Party is not, as you've just admitted, Kate. We've got a handful, less than 10% of our PLP, who are of your opinion.
At the moment.
And therefore, we are in the luxurious position of knowing what our party political position is, and we are therefore able to have a position, as we had at the last election and the one before that and the one before that. So it's the mandate I stood on and you stood on.
No,
we are a pro-European party.
I had in my election address that I supported a referendum and I wanted to see a fundamental change in our relationship.
But you stood on a Labour ticket.
And what I would say is Jeremy Corbyn, our leader, I know is perfectly relaxed about a Labour Leave campaign. In fact, he and John McDonnell spent most of their time during the last 10 years in the same lobby as those of us.
Well, he voted to leave in 1975.
Exactly.
I'm relaxed about it too, and I'm relaxed about us making the case, but I still think that we've got a very clear position in the party.
Can I just clarify this, Owen Smith? The government position is that there will be a government policy, almost certainly, in favour of staying in and to vote to remain. But that those cabinet ministers who don't agree with that can go their own way for the duration of the referendum.
Yeah.
Will shadow cabinet members be allowed to do that if they don't agree with the party line?
Well, I'm not in charge of that, am I, Andrew?
No, but
well, that would be a matter for the leadership
But what's your
of
view?
the Labour Party. Well, my view is that we should have a whipped vote. My view is we've got a settled Labour Party policy, which is that we are pro-European, and therefore I think we should have a clear position, unlike the Conservatives.
Right.
I know you say
So
that-
shadow ministers should not, if they disagree with the party line, should not be allowed to
That's
go
my
their own
view.
way.
That's my view. And my view is that we should have a clear position. We are pro-European, and therefore we should have collective responsibility and stick together and vote for Europe.
So we're going to have a kind of stitch-up between the
It's not a stitch-up,
establishment
Kate.
in Labour
It's
and
not
the
a stitch-up at
establishment in
all.
the Conservatives.
No.
Unfortunately, it's going to be the public who decide, and the last thing they want at the moment is these stitch-ups between politicians cosy at Westminster. Out in the country, the mood is very, very different.
Kate, you were right a moment ago when you said it will be people in the country who decide in the referendum. You're, of course, self-evidently right about that. But it is our job, I think, to provide leadership. Now, you are trying to provide leadership, making the case for our leaving Europe. I'm being clear, the Labour Party, that you're a member of, in the minority on this issue, is going to make a case and offer leadership to the country and say we should stay
And
for
we
the
are
benefit of
finding that
British
across
people.
the country now, parliamentary parties, Labour parties, are wanting to have that debate. They're inviting
And they
people
will
from
have it.
Labour, and we need to have
Mine
that
will have it,
debate.
yours will have it.
And we have never had that debate in the party since the end of the Neil Kinnock era.
But we
Is it
have-
your
we have
view
it
that-
now,
I think
and that's
I'm very
What's your view on the? I mean, as I understand it, you've had 200,000 new members since Mr. Corbyn became leader. Not since you lost the election. You had a lot after that. 200,000 since he became leader. Are there any indications of what their attitudes are to Europe?
Well, you might say, I would say it, but we are finding genuinely that new people who are coming in have a very different attitude to this idea that the EU is all about workers' rights, and so social Europe is finished. The EU
Okay.
project is on its way
That's
out.
not
When are you
And
game,
that's not my
when are you
experience,
game
Kate.
planning? What are you game planning for
At all.
the timing of the referendum?
Well, we are still game planning for a July, but I think it's more likely to be September.
You
The Prime Minister wants his little piece of white paper con to be kind of put
Okay.
through as quickly as possible.
So you think
June.
September rather
June.
than
You're still
end
thinking
June?
I think
Yeah.
June
No, I
is
don't
it.
think it
When do you
will.
think it'll be?
June, it'll be too
wait
near
and
the
see.
Yeah.
I thought you
A
would
bit
say
like
that.
the budget.
All right,
Yeah.
Kay Hoy,
Give us a
we'll
date.
we'll see a lot of you between now and then.
I hope so.
Thank you.
Any shadow cabinet members you know who might come over to your side?
One or two.
Which ones?
Oh, I don't think this is the
Not me.
right place to tell. Not
Oh,
you.
God, people resign on here. You could just give some
Yeah.
names.
But you think one or two current shadow
yes,
cabinet members
yes.
would like to be able to
Would
campaign
like to be able to campaign.
Oh, right. Oh, well, we'll think about those during
You'll have to go
Qs.
around and ask them now.
Make a
Tom.
list. But we know you're not one of them.
I'm very clear.
Now, the